a couple of comments further to your question, Alan. One way of looking at, or another way of looking at it is spirituality not as a noun but as a verb.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The nounness of it fixes it and doesn't allow for an aliveness with it, whereas the verbness of it allows for it to be alive, to be questioned in the moment. So that I found very useful. The other thing is that the direct experience. A dear friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately, several years ago, Wayne Teasdale, who's a Christian brother.
I know him well.
You know, oh gosh,
yeah. Amazing.
Oh my God, amazing.
So talk about direct revelation. This man was a conduit for some of the highest revelation that you can access as a human being.
Yeah, and humble. You would never know, just the depth of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he was talking about the distinction religion versus spirituality in a conversation with me, and he said, it's a false dichotomy. We think that they're two separate things, he said, but in fact they're not.
Mm-hmm.
That they're two branches on the same tree. And I said, Wayne, what's the tree? And he said, the direct experience of the divine.
Right.
And why I love that is because it's very important to me that, from the spiritual world, the prejudice there is a tendency to dismiss religion as authoritative, hierarchical, white, male, the prejudice against religion, but not at the same time realizing that religion, was created or was implemented rather by people with all their flaws as well.
Right. And
that religion has a lot of gold in it, tremendous amount of gold. That in Judaism over 5,000 years, Christianity over 2,000, Islam for Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. And so this distilled wisdom that is there. So what I say to the spiritual people who have prejudice against religion is you got to be first of all you got to be complete with your own religion, and you also I suggest looking at what the wisdom that is there, because a lot of people's prejudice against religion comes from childhood trauma. The trauma being, when I was a kid, religion did this and it shouldn't have.
Right.
Or when I was a kid, religion didn't do this and it should have. And so that trauma, I think that's a major piece of work that needs to be done with respect to the spiritual side of the equation. That is, that completion about their adulting, as it were, with respect to religion. On the other side, on religion's side, that they need to realize that there's this whole growing body of people who are not coming to religion, and what are the ways that religion can reach out and incorporate them in ways that are meaningful to them without bastardizing or distilling unnecessarily the value that I believe is in religion. So for me, I think a next major piece of work is that those two sides need to cross the threshold and begin to be in dialogue and be in each other's camp and see what is of value and what is not of value in there. So that's a long way to answer, but for me it's very important because I've heard too much of the prejudice of both sides against the other.
Right, and it's based on misunderstanding. So what's lovely about what you're saying, when you start with the experience, which you both have had, you can test that experience against these doctrines.
Mm-hmm.
If it resonates and it works and it's gold, as you said, you employ it. If it's somehow been distorted through a human's desire to control or to manipulate, you can reject it while maintaining the core essence of the teachings.
And I would say the equivalent on the other side as well, because I've heard many spiritual people who are just as dogmatic.
For sure.
In their own way. So the issue for me is not about the dogma of religion or the dogma of spirituality. It's about the dogma of dogma.
Right. Well, exactly right. And the encouragement to question explodes that. Explodes dogma.
It does.
Dogma can't exist in light of questioning.
David Sable, who is on our board and who teaches our two undergraduate courses, does in each class he does a contemplation. And in essence, what he's doing is having people who have a grip on a certain notion with respect to faith or meaning or religion or whatever, to let that grip loose and to discover a deeper truth underneath that. And I think it's brilliant work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you, Vince. So, in terms of encouraging questioning, how do you teach? Well, how do you teach some of the things that we've spoken about? Some of them are more subtle. Some of them are not direct skills or something that you can learn directly from a textbook. So, how do you within an academic environment? How do you teach some of these things?
Well, I think first thing I would say is Martin introduced me to a gentleman named Andre Delbecq, who's at Santa Clara University, I think it is.
Yeah.
And he, who has been thinking and studying and writing and teaching in academia for a long time, really says, I think, and it really struck me, was that the starting point is not religion or spirituality or dogma or how we do this or what day we go to church or you know what day we worship on. It's really our religious or spiritual experience, and that's how we're going to have this conversation and share and discuss and question together, is based on our experience. And I think that translates also into the academic and into the workplace, academic environment and into the workplace, through some of these contemplative exercises that Martin mentioned, where people can be taught, in my experience, both as a student and as leading some of these exercises, is that people they get it. They get it very quickly, I think, and really it's a matter of first understanding how to listen to yourself and know yourself and what your own experience is, and then understanding how to listen and be curious about someone else's experience, so that you can actually share them.
What's interesting, I think, about what Vince is saying, Alan, is that for me that's a very deep shift in what academia is. That is, what he's saying is it's not you come into a class and the information is imparted to you. It's the notion of the experience, the grappling with the questions, the interaction, the contemplation. And so what David's doing through his course and what Andre spoke about is this notion of shift in what it means to be in academia. And I think that this hunger that Vince and I talk about in the workplace is also clearly present in academia, in students, and in academics, but just with respect to students. And so if students have this opportunity to engage in a way that they may never have been aware of is existent, it's huge. It's huge. And we're leveraging then their experience of what work can be. So they're the future leaders.
That's beautiful.